Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to do another movie review special. We did the last one for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse with my good friends, and today it's about DC's The Flash, which is full of controversy, and there are a lot of people discussing about, the good and bad points of this movie. So before I introduce my good friends on the live stream. For those people who are not familiar with me, I'm Red Dot Diva. I'm a lifestyle and pop culture blogger based in Singapore. I've been covering entertainment and fun things happening in Singapore for about 13 years. I used to say in my live stream that I can't remember, and I finally checked it out. It was 13 years. Why does time fly? I started this live stream in 2020 during the COVID, and we couldn't meet each other. And I felt that when everyone got onto the internet to find out more about comics or movies or pop culture, and usually the people who are featured who are Asian would be from Japan or Korea or maybe even China. And I'm from Singapore. So as a Southeast Asian, I felt that our creatives and talents here they don't have enough spotlight. And we do have a lot of people who are working in comics and movies as well, and who are actors or maybe very talented cosplayers. So I thought that I could start this live stream to give them a platform to share about their experiences, and so that the audience will be able to know the Southeast Asian creatives in our, doing their fantastic artistry in our region as well. And so this live stream, there are those that have been already broadcasted on my Red Dot Diva Facebook page, and some of them are in YouTube, on my YouTube channel, because I started to broadcast on YouTube channel a few months later. So, but today we are just like, we have so many things to talk about the Flash, and we hope that you will join us to interact with us. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my geek bro, Jedd. Hello, Jedd.
Hello. Hi, Tina. Hello. Good
Please
to see you.
introduce yourself to the audience who are not familiar with you.
All right, I'm Jed. I've known Tina for about 10 plus years. We met doing press at Comic Cons in Singapore, and I've also met at Comic Cons overseas. And I am a film critic and a writer. I write freelance. I used to write for F Movie Magazine. It was Singapore's only movie magazine for a while. Then I moved over to InSing, the website. And currently, I mainly write for Chris World, which is the in-flight entertainment magazine of Singapore Airlines. So I've done a lot of other stuff as well. I've been on the radio. I've written like scripts for corporate government PSA videos and a bunch of things. So you've seen me around. I'm Jedd the Jedi most places. Sometimes Jedi the movie guy. It can be a bit confusing, but those two people are both me. So yeah, I'm the person that I'm grateful that I'm the person Tina calls on when she wants to talk about movies. And we had a live stream 2 weeks ago about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I would highly recommend you check out if you've seen the movie and if you want to kind of get a deep dive into it. And we also have our third member of the crew today.
Yes. Hello, John.
Hi,
John.
hi. Yeah, my name is John. I met Tina through Jedd actually, and I've known Jedd for a long time, almost half our lives, I guess. At this point, I'm the person that they usually talk to when it comes to comic things. I read from every publisher, very into this universe. It's exciting to see it being more mainstream these days, and excited to talk to them about this movie because
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
actually
I,
quite a big plot point in the DC canon actually.
yeah. I'm very excited to actually do these movie reviews and recaps with you guys, because, if you go to YouTube, right, and all these reactions and recaps are mostly from the Western side of the world, when, in the English ones at least. So I haven't seen many people around our region who do this. And I think that, it's been fun. And I know that some people have watched and they said that they thought it was good. So, I mean, you know, we'll continue to improve on that. But thank you for those who have been supporting and interacting with us. I mean, you guys, the audience, are what makes us want to do more of this as well, to know that, our opinions are being heard and not just like floating in the air without nobody noticing.
Kind of floating in the ether.
Yeah.
Because
So, yeah.
in the landscape today, we cannot compete. Tina nor I can compete with a fitness influencer with 1 million followers. They may not necessarily know a lot about movies, but they're going to be sent to do junkets and interviews and things like that over people like us, because that's kind of how the industry is. So I think I always say that I admire Tina's dedication to do this entirely. Like, this is a thing that Tina doesn't get any money from. This is the thing that Tina does completely for fun, which is a lot more effort than I would put in for something that I may not be getting money from. And the thing you're welcome. Yeah, and the thing I always say about John is that I really like talking to John, because he is somebody who reads and watches so many things and has a really deep knowledge about comic books and comic book media, but he's very chill. He doesn't get worked up about stuff. So for a lot of people, like, it's a competitive sport to be angry about Star Wars or to be angry about Marvel or DC or something like that. And I don't get that from John. So that is a big thing that I feel that he brings to the table.
Yeah, I'm a believer in getting our voice out, especially for, because we're in this region. And as you said, the algorithm doesn't really favor us as individuals and as an indie kind of like reviewer or not influencer. I don't really like the term influencer, maybe like blogger, social media content provider, a content creator, sorry. This is how then, we have to do something ourselves. And I'm just glad that people actually do watch even snippets of it, or listen to it as a podcast, just streaming on the YouTube and on their mobile phones, Thanks so much for that. I think we really, really, really appreciate it. I have to just say this up front. We'll probably say that again at the end of the live stream, but okay, let's get on to it. And The Flash, I've been reading about how it has been performing in the box office, and they were saying about 9 million in the US Thursday preview night, and DC is now expecting about 60 to 70 million over the weekend. And actually, it's not fantastic, but it's not terrible, as in that it's the poorest thing ever, because in comparison with other superhero movies like Sony's Venom, DC's own Aquaman, and even Marvel's Ant-Man, the 9 million mark at Thursday preview night is actually about there, and it's higher than Marvel's Ant-Man even. So, it's kind of like the mid. They probably just about made it or so. And there are probably several reasons for that, which we will discuss later on. But before we get onto that, I always like Jedd to give us the spoiler-free movie review. This is the spoiler-free section. For the first half, we will get into the spoilers in the second half, and there'll be a warning. You can kind of switch it off and come back later when you've watched the movie. And then also, I would just like to apologize first if I get pronouns wrong. It's not that I'm trying to be nasty, but I'm old, so I'm still learning and trying to get things right. So I'll just apologize upfront for that, because I do forget about the pronouns. We'll try to remember as much as possible. So Jedd, go ahead. Give us the movie synopsis.
All right, we have a lot to get to, so let's see how fast I can do this, which is relevant for this film. So The Flash takes place in the DC Extended Universe, and it is set after the events of Justice League. So in the beginning of the movie, we meet Barry Allen, who is played by Ezra Miller, and he's called upon by Batman, who's played by Ben Affleck, to help with a crisis that is ongoing in Gotham City. And The Flash kind of feels sidelined. He's like, I'm the Justice League's janitor. They only call on me when there's some unimportant thing happening. And he has this idea that what if he were able to travel fast enough through time that he could go back in time and save both of his parents? Because a key part of the Flash's backstory is his mother, Nora, who is played in this movie by Maribel Verdú, was killed. And his father, Henry Allen, played by Ron Livingston, this movie replacing Billy Crudup from the earlier movies, was framed or was like falsely accused of murdering his mother. So he has this idea. Batman tells him, don't mess with the timeline, there's going to be consequences, but he does it anyway. So what he doesn't count on is when he goes back in time, he is able to prevent his mother's death and his father's imprisonment, but he runs into a younger version of himself, also played by Ezra Miller, in this timeline where Barry Allen's parents are alive. So this action has caused like a ripple effect throughout the timeline. And it means that there are no superpowered beings in this alternate reality. There is no Justice League. There's no Wonder Woman or Aquaman or Cyborg. All of the characters in Justice League are not there. There is, however, a Batman. And this Batman is a different Batman than the one we met earlier. This Batman is played by Michael Keaton, who is back in the role after 30 years. So the two Barrys go to see Batman, and they need Batman's help to look for whom they think is Superman, because General Zod, played by Michael Shannon, has invaded the Earth, and you're kind of reliving the events of Man of Steel, except this time there is no Superman. So instead, they go to find whom they think is Superman, and they meet Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, who's played in this movie by Sasha Calle. And she is an alternate version of Superman in this reality where Superman never made it to Earth. Instead, Supergirl made it and was imprisoned, and then they free her. And now there are all of these changes in the timeline, and they need to fix it. The two Barrys and Batman and Supergirl need to tie everything up, or else there will be nothing less than a crisis on Infinite Earths.
Thank you, Jedd.
You're welcome. That was very hard.
Before we proceed, hello, Brutus. You're online
Hello.
as well. And anyone else who's just watching there and looking, hello. The first question, before we get that, I'm going to say, like, what did you have any expectations when you went to watch the movie? For me, I thought it was just going to be crappy because of all the problems that I knew surrounding the production of this film movie. I just went in like, okay, if this crap, it's okay, because I got the chance to watch this movie for free because of a very good friend, and somehow Geek Culture was sponsoring the ticket. And I was like, but I really love DC, so I was like, I hope it's not crap. But if it's crap, I'll just like, okay, I know what's the problem surrounding the movie. So did you feel the same way, or were you like, I really want to watch The Flash?
John, you go first. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I didn't really have too high of an expectation. I expected the movie. I felt I got what I expected from the movie because of what Ezra Miller got into, the shenanigans that happened, and the movie was shelved and then unshelved and then shelved again, and then went through that whole debacle, and for a long period of time, it was looking like we'll never get to actually see the movie. So didn't really have too much of an expectation. I would say that I did get what I expected. How about you, Jedd?
Yeah, so I've been following the development of the movie, and it is now kind of an oft-repeated line that this movie was announced in 2014 and came out in 2023. So in the time span in between it was announced and was released, an entire Flash TV series began and ended.
Yes.
So this was not always supposed to be Flashpoint. At some point, it was going to be a Flash and Cyborg kind of buddy comedy. And then there were some other ideas that were being thrown around. So it's funny because the title card of this movie, there's a little gag in there where it's about to form the words "The Flash," and it's interrupted halfway by someone talking to Barry, and then it goes back and comes back up again. So I think that is like an inside joke. That is a reference to how the development of the movie has been very much a start and stop kind of thing. And there was a report, I had a deadline of Variety, one of the trades, that an unnamed high-profile comic book movie being released in 2023 was submitted to the Writers Guild of America for arbitration with 45 writers attached. So everyone was saying, it's got to be this, it can't be any other things, right? But what other comic book movie is it going to be? The Marvels did not have 45 writers. Yeah. So at some point of time, Seth Grahame-Smith, Jonathan Goldstein, John Francis Daley, Rick Famuyiwa, like a whole bunch of people touched this. They even offered it to Robert Zemeckis, and it's kind of like a very obvious reason why they did that, because this is a big riff on Back to the Future. the biggest single influence on this movie, I think, is Back to the Future. So they were like, let's give it to the Back to the Future guy. And then Robert Zemeckis was like, I will do Pinocchio instead, which I do not know how wise a decision that was. But in any case, it ended up on the doorstep of Andy Muschietti, who worked with Warner Brothers on It and It Chapter 2, and then earlier did Mama. And his sister Barbara Muschietti is the producer on this. So I feel like all of those things considered, that this even has some kind of a shape is a miracle. And the thing that I was very shocked by, honestly, was how bullish Warner Brothers was by drumming up the hype, by having people say this is the greatest superhero movie ever. That they brought it to CinemaCon. So you only bring a thing to CinemaCon, which is the convention where movie theater owners are kind of courted by the exhibitors. It's like the movie industry, Hollywood, saying, this is what we have for next year. Please put out movies in your theaters. That only happens if they're confident about it. So for context, the movie that debuted at CinemaCon last year was Top Gun Maverick. So they were saying that The Flash is going to be something on the level of Top Gun Maverick. We think that it can be as successful as that. And we had heard a lot of people call it like, this is the greatest comic book movie of all time. They were very bullish about doing fan screenings, even fan screenings in an unfinished form, which normally studios are very reticent to do. Like test screenings are always unfinished, but fan screenings are usually not unfinished. So I think it was very interesting for me to look at the way they were promoting this movie. And it was like, they have so much confidence in something that they should have no confidence in. And I have never seen a comic book movie being promoted where it's being promoted around the star, which for various reasons happened. Like we have to ignore that there's an actor playing the Flash in a movie called The Flash. The people doing a publicity is the actor playing Supergirl. So that I've never seen that happen before. And by against all odds and in spite of itself, it works. It functions as a movie. Like whether you like it or not, like it functions. There's an arc, there are emotional beats, there's character stuff. There's a lot of stuff in it that could do with a lot of tightening, but like taking all of that into account, I think it is a success. I think as a movie, it functions. The bar is low, but that's where it is. It functions.
I agree with you about how surprised I was that there were emotional beats that did touch my heart in some ways. There was moving scenes that weren't just stuck in there for the purpose of just bad edits or pushing patches of production shots together. It wasn't like this, and I was just totally surprised by what we actually saw in the movie theaters. That to me, in the end, it was kind of like, hey, this is actually quite good, in a sense like that. Yeah. But it wasn't what WB drummed up and put up the hype that it was the best ever, and they asked popular, celebrities like Stephen King or someone like Tom Cruise now, saying that he loved the movie. I don't think the hype is to be believed in that sense. What about you, John?
I mean, it's surprisingly very competent as a movie. I think it suffers quite a lot of being released at the same time as Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
So that show is very polished versus this movie, which feels unpolished in a certain aspect. So that the hype doesn't really match the finished product. I think, it is competent, but it's not.
I know.
Shows that I would say changes everything.
It's not life-changing. I was at the screening which Jedd was attending as well, and beside me, I'm not sure whether they were. I think he was a guy who worked in Disney, because he was mentioning to the guy sitting next to him, and then when the movie ended, right, then he says like, "Isn't this almost like Spider-Verse?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of a bad time to have both of it together." And
so the funny thing is, at some point, this was going to be released much closer to No Way Home.
Yeah,
I think that the direct comparison is more No Way Home than Across the
Yeah.
Spider-Verse.
So any non-comic book or pop culture fan who comes to watch a movie after Spider-Verse, right, is going to say like this is like a budget ripoff or something like this, which is kind of sad lah, which is not what its intention is actually, because
I
it's
think there's
based on
also
a comic.
there's also the whole thing now about, are we all multiversed out? Does everyone have too much of multiverse going
Yeah.
on? Because we
Fatigue.
see it in and kind of like the first in this present day comic book era, the first movies or TV shows to really do that, or the CW DC TV shows,
Yeah.
where they introduced that idea of multiverse, like in the Flash and Legends of Tomorrow, and they had big crossover events every year, and then you had them, toy with it in Spider-Man Far From Home, where Mysterio claims to be from another parallel universe, but he's not. And then they actually tell you the multiverse is real in No Way Home, and then they have
Yeah.
Multiverse of Madness, and then the Best Picture winner this past year,
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once, is a multiverse
Yes.
story as well. So the reason that multiverse stories exist in the comics is that what if kind of idea. But then when you do it in media, whether it's TV or movies, it feels like a cop-out. It feels like a way a lot of times to bring
Yeah.
back a dead character and to sort of like nullify the stakes and render
Yeah.
the stakes moot. So when you do a multiverse story, those are all things that are kind of tricky. I think the audience needs to be in the frame of mind of accepting the structure of a multiverse, and every property has sort of like slightly different rules between the multiverses, what can happen, what can't happen. And it's funny because Across the Spider-Verse is a movie about the rules of the multiverse. It's about what might make the multiverse collapse, what will render it unstable.
Yeah.
And you have a little bit of that in this movie as well, where you are playing with that very comic book idea of these are the things we can do and these are the things we can't. But then obviously when you have time travel and all of that stuff involved, it's not going to make internal sense. And like even the movies where they're like, we spend all of the effort to make this the most airtight time travel story possible, there will still be holes. So
Yes.
it's just a matter of, does it work enough emotionally for you to go along with it?
Yeah, I would say the what I like. Okay, let's talk about what we like about the movie. We all agree that the story is fine. I like that the humor kind of works in most of the scenes that they intended the humor to be funny. It was a bit funny, and I have to admit that despite of all their problems, Ezra Miller is a capable actor. So they were able to bring out the scenes, where they needed to project kind of like grief and sadness. I think the older Barry Allen was less annoying than the younger one, and in those scenes, Ezra did it very well, I should say, especially towards the end of the movie. Then, of course, my favorite one was the fan favorite that everybody's looking forward to, which is Michael Keaton as Batman. When he came on screen, everybody was like, yeah, there were cheers and everyone was shrieking. And I guess most of us who grew up with Michael Keaton as Batman in that movie missed him. And I think he did very well for the scenes that he was in as well. Iconic Batman. And also good to see Michael Shannon back as Zod, although the CGI took away a lot from his facial expression and his acting. I think that distracted from his scenes. But other than that, yes, as a whole, as I said, it's very hard to tear the things apart because all the problems, it kind of like managed to piece together. And I didn't have a bad time in the theater, which I use that to judge whether it's such a torture to sit through 2 hours or 1.5 hours. Is it terrible? Like, did I feel bored? Did I feel as if like I need to leave the theater? And it wasn't like this. So, it was enjoyable in a sense, despite of people arguing about the issues with Ezra Miller. What about you, John? What do you like about the movie?
I mean, very similar to you. I did like those parts. I think the acting that the cast, they did a really good job. One thing that I really like is how simple they got the explanations for the whole plot device, so to speak, of
Mm.
the movie. They didn't try to over-explain. They used it in a very simple and they showed you a very easy to follow format in the movie. So I think that was really well done. A lot of movies they try to do too much. They try to explain, then they try to over-explain. One movie I would reference is Tenet. Tenet spends the entire movie trying to explain to you the movie. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I think it worked here. How about you, Jedd? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I think structurally I find it just very impressive that there's a beginning, a middle, and end, because a lot of comic book movies don't have that. A lot of comic book movies are these like tedious beasts where you have to do homework. And obviously, this works better if you are familiar with the comics, if you're familiar with the DC Extended Universe. But I think someone coming in having never seen any of the earlier DCEU movies, even having never seen the Michael Keaton Batman movies, can make emotional sense of this movie. That there's enough of an arc that is self-contained. There's enough of they do a version of the Barry origin story, and I think they do it well, you know. And it is a tricky thing. It's also a tricky thing to please the fans, because fans can be very fickle. Like if you do too much, it feels like pandering. If you do too little, it feels like you're not taking it seriously. So there's some stuff in this movie that is very, very subjective, where some people are like, it's just in there as fan service, it's dumb. And then there are other people who really like it. And there are a couple of the cameos like that in this movie that worked on me extremely, that I was like hooting and hollering and pumping my fist. Exactly what they want, you know, and sort of like a sucker for that. Because when that happens, it feels like a reward. It feels like a reward for being obsessed with this stupid nonsense your whole life, from stuffing your brain full of it, that you don't have any space for useful things like how to do taxes, you know. So my brain has no space for any useful things. So I think it gets you there. There is that sort of euphoria of, yay, you know, I was a fan of all this stuff and now this is for me. But obviously that cannot be the only thing. So I think that they are smart enough to not make that the only thing. And it's stuff like when you bring back Michael Keaton, it cannot just be a cameo. And especially because how heavily the movie marketing it with him. So I don't think he 100% wants to be there, but when he's good, he's very good. So obviously, every time he's doing physical action, it's not him. It's either a stunt person or CGI, or more often it's a CGI. So it's a good thing that his biggest action sequence is him sitting in a cockpit in an airplane, because then that actually is him. So the bits are just him standing around in the Batcave talking are the best bits. Like you have a Batman who has lost his purpose, who has been retired for many years, and now he has a purpose again. And I think Michael Keaton plays that very well. He has a sort of like gravitas, and he's able to reach that kind of sadness. And I think Ben Affleck is very good in this as well. Like there's not a lot of him in it, but the relationship that they set up between Bruce Wayne and Barry, I think, is a much more fleshed out kind of extension of what we saw in Justice League. So I feel like there are these little rewarding character moments and little things for you to enjoy as a fan. But even if you're not following this obsessively, there are enough pieces for you to make sense of it, you know? So it's like, I mean, there are a lot of movies where these comic book movies, someone appears and you need to ask your friend, like,
who is this guy?
So there's a bit of that in this as well, but I don't think it breaks it, you know. So I think the balance is very impressive, honestly.
Most of the characters are recognizable, or at least big enough for people who are not even following pop culture in an obsessive manner kind of know who they are.
Because it's DC especially, I think, is all about iconography.
Yes,
it's kind of about symbols and images, and I mean Marvel is that as well, but DC kind of places a lot of emphasis on that, of like, you know, the symbol of the bat.
I think the
and
cartoons
like,
help. So people grow up with DC cartoons, right? So they kind of like remember the iconic symbols and all that, so they know the costumes.
Yeah, we will get to like a more specific kind of comparison later, and John will help us with that. But I think it's a very smart adaptation of Flashpoint. So Flashpoint is a story that people are kind of lukewarm on. I think a lot of DC fans are like, you know, the story only exists to reboot the DC universe. The reason why Flashpoint the comic was to reboot into New 52 that lasted like very, very short, and then they did
Yeah.
Rebirth, right? So Flashpoint is a story where the basic thing is the same, where Barry is trying to prevent his mother's death and his father's imprisonment, and then causes all of these things. But then this movie kind of like plops in pieces of the DCEU instead of the pieces that are there in the comics, and the replacements that they make, the adjustments that they make, I think work. I think it's a very smart adaptation of a comic book story in that way. Of we need to play with the pieces that are already on the board, and the DCEU as it is already like a mess, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you have
it is.
the Snyder stuff, and then you have the Snyder adjacent stuff, and then you have the stuff that is like underneath and to the side and to the top of that, and it is sort of this amorphous like blob, which is why they're going to reboot it, right? Which is why James Gunn and Peter Safran are doing their DCU. So to have that and to say we need you to make a movie that interacts directly with that is a challenge. We need you to make a movie that is about the shape of this. So we need to go okay, all right. So Man of Steel happened and Justice League happened, but did Shazam happen? Right, the kind of thing. did Black Adam happen? I don't know. So what matters in the DCEU? I think they're able to isolate it and kind of put it in place and position it on the board in this movie in a way that I think structurally, in a storytelling way, I was quite impressed with.
Yeah. Before we get to the parts that we didn't like about the movie, we'd like to hear more about John's opinion as to the adaptation of Flashpoint in the Flash movie versus the comics, and was it very messy in the comics as well, or what was like what was the bad points in the comics that didn't they managed to make it better in the movie?
I think Jedd said it correctly. This is a really good adaptation of Flashpoint. Flashpoint is a very messy thing in the comic. In the movies, they're trying to combine all the universes that existing together. Similarly, in the comic, it was combining DC, Vertigo, and Wildstorm all into one, leading to New 52 and then DC Rebirth after that. I think one thing really good is that they scaled up the amount of characters that is present in Flashpoint. In the comics, it's 5 issues, but there's more than 20 characters. So you don't know really where to follow half the time. I mean, you could read all the spin-offs, but that's the problem with events in comics. It makes you jump from comic to comic to comic to comic to get a consistent flow. Whereas in the movie, 2 hours, it's just nice, and they kept it very, very contained, I would say. The leading up to the resolution of the Flashpoint, I think they did it a lot better in the movie, where Barry's decision to actually restore the universe is a bit more organic. So, in the comic, he was basically shoehorned into making a decision that he didn't necessarily want to make a decision, but it was the only decision that he could make at that point of time. And so I think they did a really good job in that sense. I'm trying to avoid a lot of things because that will count as spoilers, because there's the differences between the comic and the movie, but there are a lot of similarities, which is also really nice for people like me that read everything. We get to see this and say, hey, yeah, that I remember that from the comics. So that's also it has enough fan service in there.
Yeah.
So the kind of broad, like, sorry, Tina.
I was because I know many people don't really watch the CW Arrowverse, but I'm the one that watches all the Arrowverse TV series in all seasons. Of course, I can't remember every episode, but yeah, the Flashpoint was also in the Flash TV series, and it was in end of season 2, leading to season 3, where season 3 first episode was already the new universe that he kind of entered to stop the death of his mother. And because of the Barry Allen in the CW series, a lot of other things happen as well with the universe being changed, which is one of the thing is that those people who have actually followed all of the Arrowverse, one of the things was the Clark Kent had actually a son, one son, John Kent. And now if you look at Superman and Lois, he has twin sons. And that was also due to Barry Allen changing things around. And then I think further down in season 3, midway, there was this crisis event as well. I think there was some aliens called the Dominators or something like this. And then he had Supergirl, and the Legends of Tomorrow people, and Green Arrow. And then they didn't know that Flashpoint had happened because obviously the universe seems normal to them. But then after that, Barry Allen had to confess that he did this and things changed. And the Legends of Tomorrow, folks was like, why do you do this? Because, we've been trying to change, correct time aberrations, flying here in our spaceship here and there, and here you are changing things. So the Flashpoint is actually one of those things that created a lot of chaos. So I would agree with Jedd in the sense. I think it's a reason for them. That is why probably WB has decided to release this movie as well, in light of many other things that has happened in Warner Brothers. I think we will get on to that later on, especially with John with his spoilers as well. But I'd like to get into what I didn't really appreciate in the movie at all. And the first thing that jumps out with me was the CGI. There was a lot of places where it looks muddy and unfinished, and kind of like blurry. And then I noticed it first off was the scenes where there were two Barrys together. It was like uncanny valley because the younger Barry, right, in proportion looked really small compared to the actual Barry Allen in certain angles. And then the whole entire battle scene at the end wasn't very spectacular either. I know a lot of people crap on Zack Snyder and his CGI, use of CGI. But at least his is able to look a bit prettier, And then I was joking with my friend as well that even with the budget special effects that they are able to do in Superman and Lois on a TV series, organically it just looks even better than what we saw in the spectacle battle scene at the end. Those are the things I didn't like. The other thing that stood out for me was when Wonder Woman came on the screen to okay.
Is that a
Should I
spoiler?
say this? This is a spoiler. Okay, I will not say this. But when the Wonder Woman scene, I will mention about that later. Remind me.
I'm very sorry, everyone. Okay,
Remind me later.
it's not a big deal, honestly.
It's not a big deal, yeah. But there was one particular reason why I didn't really like that scene, which I will explain later.
It's like 10
And
seconds.
as you mentioned, the too much fan service. At some point, yes, it does seem very cheesy, but then also they managed to balance off with some things that were not too cheesy. And I'm like, okay, some of it that works, some of it doesn't work. I know Jedd is going to mention a few of those, I suppose. Yeah, maybe Jedd, you can continue from that as when I mentioned fan service about who are appearing on scenes, and then generally just the weird PR that's happening with the movie that kind of taints the entire thing. That brings a lot of questions, about what goes on behind the scenes in the executive and board level of WB and the relationship they have with their new owners, Discovery, and then with Ezra Miller's issues, and then what they are projecting to the people out there, and especially to the fans who really want to like DC more, but here comes these issues that make us feel like, sullied, like we are kind of like, should I like this more or should I just not like it at all? And there's already a discussion out there among fans, not even wanting to put money to watch the film, or even getting a bit riled up when people say that they enjoyed the film. It's just not a good place to be when actually it's a superhero movie that's supposed to make everyone feel good. That's what I feel in the end. What about you, Jedd?
Yeah, so I'm with you on the visual effects. I think that is the thing that has already been beaten in the ground like just a few days into the movie's release. I don't think this movie is in releasable condition. And it's funny because that was the word that was used about Batgirl, right? Batgirl was unreleasable,
Yeah,
and that was a $90 million tax write-off for Warner. So I think what you're saying as well is that it is very hard to go into this movie and not think about the surrounding context and not think about the state of Warner Brothers and the state of DC and how it feels like every single thing is damage control. Like it feels like the existence of this movie is damage control, and then you need to do damage control for the damage control. Then you need to do damage control for the damage control for the damage control. It's a damage control matryoshka doll,
yeah,
So I think that's it's frustrating because like what you're saying, you want to feel good about it. You want to feel good about a big spectacle movie. It's
yeah,
like Back to the Future. You want to enjoy it, but then at the same time, there is this kind of cloud hanging over it. So I would highly encourage everyone to go and look up the extent of Ezra Miller's crimes because I think most people don't really know just exactly what happened. People know nebulously they did things, they did something, but the things they did are very bizarre and
yeah,
kind of. If you go down the list, you're like, how did all of this happen in one
yeah,
year? From the Hawaii rampage to the thing with Gibson Iron Eyes. So there's so much stuff. The Vermont farm. There's a lot of stuff. It is strange. So I think for me, where I come down on it is I really, really want Ezra Miller to be held accountable for their actions, to be responsible for their actions. I want him to face consequences. It sounds like allegedly what is going on is a lot of NDAs, a lot of settlements, a lot of paying people off to keep them quiet. I mean, that is what unnamed sources are telling the trades and things like that. But then it's very funny for Warner Brothers to kind of like promote the movie. It's a movie called The Flash, but we cannot talk about The Flash. So we can talk about Batman and we can talk about
yeah. I
Supergirl. So
know. They've been
obviously
like,
it is a very
Batman.
awkward, it's a very awkward position to be in. Right? I don't envy anybody who has and John was saying that this is like The Boys, this is like the kind of stuff they do on VOD has to do on The Boys. That's what it kind of feels like. But at the same time, I don't think that the conversation about this movie is only that. And I think that some people feel that's all there is to the movie. The movie kind of begins and ends with Ezra Miller. So obviously, they cast a cloud over it because they are in it twice. And Tina was saying that she likes their performance. I think they're good in this movie, but I've never liked their Barry. Their Barry to me doesn't resemble Barry from the comics at all. Like there's no similarities between the way they're directed by Zack Snyder and by Joss Whedon. And then, kind of now by Andy Muschietti and their choices they're making that parallel Barry. And part of the problem is Wally West became very popular in the 90s. So a lot of the Wally West attributes got mapped onto other media portrayals of Barry Allen. It happens a bit, not so much, but a bit of the Grant Gustin version as well. Where the Grant Gustin version is also like kind of dorky and awkward, but not like this, not like cannot function as a human being,
Yeah,
which has never really been the Barry thing. Barry to me is always 50% nerd, 50% job.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly half.
At least the Grant Gustin one is still
Like
nerdy.
80% confidence.
Yeah. That's how he reads to be in the comics,
Yeah.
and he's also like a bit boring. So I guess they were trying to do the twitchy comic relief thing, and you see that a lot in Justice League, and you see that in whether it's the Joss Whedon version or the Zack Snyder version. So I don't think that reads as Barry to me. But like Tina was saying, it works in this movie because of juxtaposition between the younger and the older Barry. Because Ezra Miller gets to play a sillier, looser, like immature version of Barry, but they also get to play a more serious, like present day version of Barry who has gone through all of this trauma. And you have both of them against each other, and then there are emotional scenes that play out with the actors playing the parents, right? Maribel Verdú as Nora and Ron Livingston as Henry Allen that work, that really, really work, that Ezra Miller does a good job with. But do I think they are irreplaceable in this role? Absolutely not. I think there are 10, 20 other actors who can do this and can do this as good as them or better. So I feel like there is a lot of kind of hand-wringing, and they couldn't reshoot this because all of the stuff about them came out after principal photography while they were in post. And at the end, they're in every frame. So they couldn't do, the Christopher Plummer replacing Kevin Spacey thing that they did for all the money in the world.
Yeah.
But they were considering that. But then I guess now the big question mark is, Andy Muschietti says if he gets to do a sequel, he wants Ezra Miller back. So I mean, I would feel like something is not right if all of this happens and Ezra Miller comes back as the
Yeah.
Flash. But the fact that the movie exists now in this state with them in it, I think like it's not the best circumstance, but it's also not the end of the world, honestly. I'm just saying this like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to discredit the victims. I'm not trying to downplay the harm that they have caused, but I feel like it's so hard to talk about this movie in any kind of rational
Yeah, that's
perspective
the very
because,
sad thing about
because
this.
people's emotions understandably
And
get
I'm
riled up by
surprised.
it.
I'm surprised that in the courts, in the U.S. courts, both Hawaii and Vermont, he just basically, I mean, Ezra Miller basically got away with just a rap on his knuckles, you know.
Okay, so in the US, there's a very awkward thing where celebrities are given a different passport that basically grants them additional leeways to certain things. So if a victim accepts the settlement, they basically ignore that it ever happened.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think they are more legalistic.
that's
And it's
basically
very
what happened. Yeah,
awkward
Yeah.
because we exist in a timeline where The Boys is actually a show, and The Boys was created to really point this out and say the hypocrisy of this system.
Yeah,
And it's very strange that we have these shows and then this thing still happening and nobody is talking about it. Or
no,
nobody wants to talk about it because it's a very contentious issue where
yeah,
if you talk about it, are you being a bigot because he
yeah,
is part of the LGBT
Yeah.
community, or are you talking about it just because you dislike DC Universe, which is also another can
yeah,
of
which
worms
is another thing. Yeah,
that
and
happens.
there are just a lot of like sensitive issues as well surrounding what all of what has happened. As we mentioned, it's not only just Ezra, it's WB's treatment and PR of the film, you know, the fans themselves as well. And that's why I feel it's kind of sad because as a fan of DC for a very long time, we just feel that we want it back to the glory days where we felt good about DC stuff, you know. Right now,
yeah,
it's
and
like
I think
everything concerning DC, it's just there's like a black gray filter over it or something like this. Which
so
is
I mean I can't speak for everyone, but I feel, you know, and this is perhaps not a very charitable thing to say, but I feel like Warner Brothers has been trying to use the fans to sort of like whitewash and launder the movie to like build enough momentum. It's like if we get it out to enough people and then enough fans overlook the whole thing with Ezra Miller, if they focus on Michael Keaton, if they focus on Ben Affleck, if they focus on the cameos, you know, or even like Sasha Calle as Supergirl, if enough people are talking about these things, we'll forget about the Flash and the Flash, you know,
yeah, I know, I know.
and it feels like frustrating because on the one hand, the opportunity to see a movie early is a great thing. It's a rare thing. It's a great privilege. And I saw a lot of people go to those early screenings, those early fan screenings around the world. And I felt like, wow, that's cool. But why is this going on? The reason that they're doing this is to put the friends in front and the fans are
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like
yeah. Oh, pretty obvious,
the
but
catching the
yeah.
the bullets, you know, the kind
And
of
some
human
people,
shield.
you know, I
Yeah.
mean, frankly speaking, some people don't really follow this kind of or care about this kind of celebrity news,
I
to be
think most
honest,
people
you know.
don't. I think
Yeah,
most
most people
places this
don't. They
movie
just say,
comes
oh
out,
well,
no one knows who Ezra
yeah,
Miller is, what they are,
he
what
he
their
does
deal
something
is, what they
so
did. Yeah.
they do something, so what does it have to do with me? You know, most people have
Yeah.
their issues to go with, and
That's why I
yeah.
think people should look it up and then based on the information you just decide, right? So if you want to watch it, I don't think that makes you a bad person. Unfortunately, you know, there also are people who I feel are taking it to kind of an extreme where if you watch it, you are complicit in their crimes. You are supporting their crimes and endorsing their crimes. You know, so there have also been people who have proposed things like for however much you pay for the ticket to watch it, you make an equal donation to a charity that, you know, supports some
Yeah,
of the causes that
probably,
is. So, which
yeah,
is also like that. It is about kind of like what appeases your conscience rather than what do I have to do to
Yes.
look good in front of everyone else.
Yeah.
And that is the thing. The thing is, I wish we didn't have to talk about this. I really
I know,
wish we
right?
didn't, but we have to. We have to, you know? Yeah. As a DC fan, not being a DC fan has been rough. There's no fun, you know. I have been out there like every movie, whether it's Snyder, not Snyder. I was like, actually, I like all of them.
I know,
I don't like
right?
all of them equally, but
I'm
I
with
like
you.
them fine. And then people are like, it destroys the credibility, you know, to say that you like the first
which is
Suicide
why
Squad.
I'm kind of glad that even though it's cheesy and people, you know, laugh at the the CW and Arrowverse, and they say that, you know, this kind of teenage soap opera, but at least with that, right, we have some good memories of some of the beloved characters that we enjoy, and like
I think
Stargirl
that,
especially, you know, it's such a joy to watch.
And I think the things they do in those shows are ambitious for TV. Like,
yeah, it is.
Stories about aliens and time travel, and it has that. I think something like Legends of Tomorrow really has the charm of like Doctor Who, you know, that kind
I'm
of
so
thing.
sad
It
they
feels like
cancelled
old
that.
Doctor Who, you know. So for what those things are, like with the limitations they have to work within, with kind of the soap opera feel that is mandated from the CW, you know, when like somebody like Manu Bennett shows up as Deathstroke in Arrow, you know, this works, this is good. So, you know, it's a kind of thing where you have to take into context. Like, you cannot compare everything on the same level. And I also always say, like, a lot of people have unrealistic expectations because they're looking at drawings. Human beings are not drawings.
Right.
And so if a human being doesn't look like the drawing, it's not the end of the world, you know. Sometimes a human being can look like a drawing, and a Henry Cavill looks like a drawing, but not all the time, right? So I think you need to have that context of what are the surrounding circumstances.
Okay, so we have actually, you know, talked a lot already, and I know we're going to run more than 1 hour for this show.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we're going to go way over 1 hour for this.
Lot to talk about. So hang in there for those who are still watching, or those who decide to watch later. We're going to go into the spoiler section now. Jing, jing, jang, you know, spoilers.
Elias, save yourself.
I already picked out one already.
Because my friend told me, he said, I'm going to watch it on Monday, but I want to watch
later,
so,
or something like this. Yeah. But, you know, so now I remember what the spoiler I mentioned. What are the things that I didn't like, right? Which was the Wonder Woman section where Gal Gadot came as Wonder Woman Jane and saved Batman and the Flash from falling down from the bridge or something like this. And when they pan up, right, to her, right, my first thought was like, did Josh Whedon do this? Because it's like the crotch shot of the panning up, and then her skirt was like, didn't even get even shorter than what I remember it to be. You know,
it was
really, really, like, I was like, so sleazy. That was really not going with me. I just noticed that maybe because I'm a woman, and I just like, oh, this is not nice, not good at all. I should say. That was what stood out for me. I do not know whether
that might even have been a body double. I don't think she was actually there.
Yeah,
you know?
Whatever it is, but still the shot was sleazy. sleazy. Okay.
It's like they might not have had Gal Gadot's, Gal Gadot might not know that was in it. She might be watching the movie and going, "That's not me."
And they didn't fit her very well in the costume as well, right? As you say, it could be a body double. Whatever it is, I don't really.
She did actually shoot the scene with Ben Affleck.
It was the way that the whole entire panning up sleazy shot. It was terrible. Other than that, what are the spoilerish stuff do you want to mention, John?
Sorry, Tina. Is this like spoiler stuff that doesn't
spoiler
work,
stuff really? Because just generally we're going to talk about
spoilers in general.
Spoiler
so
stuff,
we can
like
talk about the cameos
and all that.
everything.
Because just now I really wanted to leak out, then you say
yes.
In case I forget, I want to mention that.
I have spent 10 years learning how not to spoil things. It's so stressful.
Spoiler section. We can just talk about all the things that we want about the movie, and I think most of it is the cameos that people are discussing about. So maybe John, you could like to mention.
For me, it would be the similarities between the Flashpoint comic and the movie. Similarities would be he loses his powers. that does happen in the comic. It happens right off the bat in the comic where he wakes up without powers.
Okay.
This is one. Sorry, I interrupt you this moment. I think the best joke for me in the movie is when he runs around the room at normal speed and they hold the shot too long. He runs at normal speed for 5 seconds, and it goes from being funny to not funny back around to being funny because they hold the shot so long.
Yeah, and then the other similarity is when they find Superman, or in this case Supergirl, they're in prison from the start. They have been in prison and they are weakened, and the moment they're exposed to the sunlight, they gain their strength back. So those are similarities. Apart from that, one more similarity is that Barry does have a heartfelt moment with his mother. It's slightly different in the comic than it is in the show, which I think both did really well for that scene. And yeah, other than that, it's pretty much very different. I can understand the decision to make the villain Zod, because Zod is already a villain, so they are not actually destroying a character. Whereas in the Flashpoint comic, the two main villains are actually Wonder Woman and Aquaman, and these two are fan favorites in the DCU. So I can totally understand them not wanting to touch that. It would be a huge controversy because in the comic, Aquaman actually sings half of Europe, like the Western Europe, and the Amazons actually conquered UK. They have taken over UK and declared it. This is our state now. So yeah, so those are some of the differences. Which
you have like Lois is a war journalist. She's a war reporter in the UK that's occupied, right? Flashpoint. I mean, it does like the thing for the reason why you do an Elseworld story or like a alternate universe multiverse story is so that you can do things to the characters that you wouldn't do to them if they were in their prime universe. So another kind of big example of a difference, sorry to interrupt John, but the big difference is that they replaced Superman, like the skinny Superman in Flashpoint, with Supergirl, and they replaced Thomas Wayne Batman with Michael Keaton Batman. So the Batman in the Flashpoint comics is Bruce Wayne's father, where in the alleyway, instead of the parents being shot, Bruce Wayne dies. So that turns the mother, Martha, goes mad, becomes a Joker, and then the father becomes Batman, and he uses that. I know a lot of people wanted like Jeffrey Dean Morgan to come back and do that, and that may or may not have been on the cards at one point because he does play Thomas Wayne in the flashback, in Batman, in the opening of Batman versus Superman. So some people were saying, the only reason they would have cast him in that role is if sooner or later they were going to do the Thomas Wayne Batman. But they took that out and they put the Michael Keaton Batman in because they are playing with like pieces from the other media. So the substitutions to me are pretty smart. And another thing is also like there's no Reverse Flash in this movie.
Yeah.
The villain is the young Barry. It's the Dark Flash is the young Barry, which is I think a pretty smart way to do it because you have to explain so much. If you bring in Reverse Flash,
there's too much.
You have to explain so much. It was me, Barry.
You have to explain that, like,
future
creates Flash, which creates Professor Zoom.
All that mythology concerning, the powers and all that is a bit much.
I think it is, like people say, it's predictable that the villain is young Barry, which it is, but it makes emotional sense. It makes emotional sense that he loses it and kind of goes past the point of no return because he is obsessed with trying to fix it and trying to save it. And
it also makes sense because the younger Flash, right? Sorry to interrupt. The Flash never went through the
trauma,
the trauma that the older Flash went through.
So he's a lot less mature.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to let go, which is something that they always emphasize in this show. It's how to let go. Not everything has a solution.
I think one of the other things also with the younger Barry Allen was that he managed to form a bond with the older Barry Allen. So when he did find out that the original, also called the older Barry Allen, lost the mother, right? And he didn't. He was like, he grew up suddenly. He managed to feel compassion for the other guy and was trying to fix it for his bro, so called. I think that's one of the other reasons also. That's why I said in this movie there's a lot of emotional points that work. I think that it was one of the stronger things that pieced together the movie in a very satisfying way if you don't look at the CGI.
Yeah, when you have all of those like pieces on the board, you need to have
Yeah.
that through line. And also, pasta is much more important in this version than in the comics because there's the whole thing about the tomato sauce, and then also Michael Keaton has a big pasta monologue where he
Yes,
explains
oh my
time travel
God.
using spaghetti, which I love. I love it whenever people do diagrams in time travel movies, like when Doc Brown pulls down the chalkboard and starts drawing, or you know that scene in the cafe in Looper where Bruce Willis is like, "I'm not going to tell you because I'll be making diagrams with straws, so I'm not going to explain to you how time travel works."
Yeah. But like they did it really well in this show where it's very simple. They just say
Yeah.
create a fulcrum. You don't create alternate timeline.
It's not a branching thing, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that like covers your ass for a lot of plot holes because there's sort of things like, okay, Barry went back. He didn't go far enough to the childhood of Ben Affleck Batman. So by right, Ben Affleck Batman should still exist.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be Michael Keaton. It should be Ben Affleck Batman. But then you can say, oh, it caused ripples back and forth, and that is why he changed from Ben Affleck into Michael Keaton. So the thing is like, at first people were saying, did he go into the Michael Keaton universe? Did he go into the 89 universe? And it's like yes and no. Because the 89 universe, if you followed it all the way through, it would not end up in Man of Steel. You will not end up in Sword Coming.
No.
So there's a lot of like fudging here and there that goes on.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, what makes you overlook that? The emotional arc. And if you feel like you can follow the character and sympathize with the character, and if you feel like you know where their story is going, you will not like nitpick all of that.
Exactly.
Because you're nitpicking that sort of stuff if you're not invested enough in the main characters, which happens in a lot of these movies where there's a very ambitious kind of world building, you know?
Yeah. Did you like the cameos though? I know
Let's
there
run
was
down.
one that
Let's run
got
down the
everyone
cameos.
screaming.
Yes, there is absolutely one that got everyone screaming. So, okay, I think going into this, we knew there were going to be cameos. And Andy Muschietti had come out and said things like, we couldn't fit in Linda Carter Wonder Woman, we couldn't fit in Grant Gustin Flash. So these were all things that they had in the cards. Cesar Romero, Joker, Burgess Meredith, Penguin. These were things they wanted to do that they didn't put in. So in the end, we get kind of the standard ones. We get the George Reeves Superman, the Christopher Reeve Superman. Christopher Reeve Superman is alongside the Helen Slater Supergirl, which I thought was fun. You got a bit of Adam West. So the idea is that each of these other realities are represented as globes, as worlds. And the actions of Dark Flash kind of send the worlds careening into each other. And so most of the time in these cameos, you see like a CGI version of those characters and those actors looking at a hole in the sky. So it's not a very elaborate thing. We're not doing kind of like resurrecting, digital Peter Cushing as Tarkin. But this also opens a whole can of worms, I think, because Christopher Reeve is dead, George Reeves is dead, Adam West is dead, and you're using their likeness and making them do things in the character that they didn't do. Actually, it's not archival footage; it is CGI in their likeness, and that's why like it feels a bit off and it's a bit weird. And this is the thing that there's a lot of interesting fiction about this topic. There's a movie called The Congress, which is a half animated, half live action movie starring Robin Wright about an actress who sells her likeness to a studio to put into digital kind of films. And the new episode of new season of Black Mirror, Joan is Awful, that is all about this subject, and it's a really, really good episode. It's a lot of fun, and it does ask some really interesting questions. So I think for me, the thing is like, I don't love it. I remember the first kind of high profile sort of use of this was there was a CGI Audrey Hepburn who was in a chocolate commercial, and it was the most terrifying thing you'd ever seen. This was in 2012 or 2013, and the technology absolutely was not there. And it was just like weird CGI Audrey Hepburn riding the bus in Italy, and it was horrifying and terrible. So I think in this movie, it is like, it is fan service. It like John was saying, he told us after he watched the movie that it doesn't really need to be there, but at the same time, it is sort of that reward points kind of thing. And the big thing, of course, that everyone was freaking out about, and I was freaking out about, and my friend Al, whom I watched the movie with, we were yelling and screaming, was the Nicolas Cage kind of bit. So
Yes.
does anyone want to talk about this? If not, I will kind of give the context, because there's a lot of context.
No, definitely. I mean, those who have actually followed about Superman and his various versions will kind of know that they have kind of somehow wished as well that the Nicolas Cage version of Superman would exist. I don't know, John, did you kind of like hope that that would happen?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. It was
That's
a
a very good
strange
answer.
thing. I mean, like, I cannot imagine Tim Burton doing a Superman, because Superman is such a light character, like full of light and sunshine, and Tim Burton is like dark and weird and kooky and quirky. So I was kind of curious, but anyway, yeah, fans who have been following pop culture and Superman, when they saw Nick Cage appear on screen, Jedd, maybe you'd like to continue.
Okay, so this is a whole thing where in the 90s, around the time of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, being developed concurrently was a reboot of Superman called Superman Lives.
Lives, yeah.
That was going to have been directed by Tim Burton and was going to star Nicolas Cage as Superman. And they got pretty far along. It was going to come out, I think, in 98. That was the plan. And for a long time, kind of the main source of information on this was Kevin Smith. So Kevin Smith, who is the comedian and writer and director, he was a screenwriter brought on board to do a draft of the script. And he had this famous story that he told in like his live a Q&A, like storytelling sessions. Hello. So he would tell the story about how John Peters, the producer, kept on forcing weird requirements onto the movie, including that Superman had to fight a giant spider. Has to be a giant spider. Giant spider. Spider is the greatest predator in the animal kingdom. And Kevin Smith was like, what is your deal with the spider? And it was very funny because the next movie he produces, Wild Wild West, has a giant mechanical spider in it. And then also, Neil Gaiman has come out and said that John Peters was trying to force a giant mechanical spider into a movie version of The Sandman. And Neil Gaiman was like, why? What is going on? What is the spider? So the thing that Al and I freaked out about, even more than Nicolas Cage, was the spider. The spider's in this. Finally, Superman fought a giant mechanical spider. It looks like a biomechanical spider because it has hair, right? It has like a spider kind of fuzz, but it does look like it has glowing eyes. And so when we saw Nicolas Cage, we were freaking out. Then when we saw the spider, we were like, if you know what the spider means. So this is the thing, right? This exists solely for people who know about the spider.
Yeah.
And you can go through your entire life not knowing about the spider. Your life is probably better than mine. But if you know about the spider, that moment is so kind of gratifying and vindicating. And it's like you can immediately, like after the movie, you can tell your friends, like, do you know the spider? And you can tell them this whole thing. So many years ago, there was a movie called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, which is a documentary. One of those lost film documentaries, my favorite subgenres, Jodorowsky's Dune, all right, or Lost Souls, or the story about I Love Dr. Moreau. And then there's another one called Doomed, which is about the Fantastic Four movie that Roger Corman produced that was cancelled, it's filmed and unreleased. So there's a movie like that about this, where John Schnepp, the late documentary filmmaker, went and interviewed Tim Burton. He went and interviewed Kevin Smith, Wesley Strick, Dan Gilroy, and even John Peters, the producer, the giant spider guy himself, who is a fictionalized version of which appears in Licorice Pizza, played by Bradley Cooper. So Bradley Cooper has played the giant spider guy as a young man in the movie Licorice Pizza by Paul Thomas Anderson, which I think is the funniest thing. So years ago at Comic-Con, I interviewed him and his partner and producer, Holly Payne, about this movie. And unfortunately, John Schnepp passed away several years later. And I wish he could have been around to see this. I think he would have been thrilled. I would love to have known what he thought, because that interview was so interesting. It was very gratifying because they kept kind of like looking at me during the interview like, oh, you know your stuff. You know what they're talking about. You've kind of absorbed enough of like the mythology about this. And I was asking them things about like, who were they thinking of casting for Brainiac and all of that stuff. So I highly recommend that documentary, The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, which was like partially crowdfunded on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Tells you the story of the Nicolas Cage Superman. And another thing that I was, that there were rumors, right? So going into Multiverse of Madness, again, like this, everyone was like, what are the cameos? one of the cameos, because we were like, okay, we know pretty much confirmed Patrick Stewart, Professor Xavier is going to be in it. And then people were saying, John Krasinski, Mr. Fantastic. And the one that a lot of people wanted was Tom Cruise as Iron Man, because Tom Cruise was a name attached to Iron Man in the 90s before Robert Downey Jr. was cast. So in a way, this is that. This is the alternate universe of the movie that never happened, that they didn't get to see. And there was a review that called this movie like the love letter to all of Disney's, not Disney, all of DC's dead movies. The love letter to all the DC movies that never were. To all the DC movies that could exist somewhere in the multiverse. And I think that is so interesting, the idea that you're not only doing nostalgia for things that happened, you're doing nostalgia for things that didn't happen. And I mean, of course, they did this Nicolas Cage Superman thing already in Teen Titans Go to the Movies, where he voices Superman, and there's a whole deal about that. But to actually see like his likeness, to do the Con Air like head turn and the hair, and and the giant spider, like he's punching this giant spider. To me, that was nuts. So obviously, this has no bearing on the plot. It doesn't matter.
No, but it was a highlight anyway.
It's great. It is so good. I was freaking out because it and this is the thing that works, right? It works on me. Warner Brothers won, right? It is this thing of like, you nerd, you stupid nerd, you're gonna eat this up. Yes, I am.
Usually Singaporean audiences in theaters are kind of like bland, but when Nick Cage came on screen, you could hear like everyone just like gasping, and going like, oh, clapping.
It's the feeling of like, is this allowed?
I was like, really?
Yeah, because with the Christopher Reeve Superman and Adam West Batman, for as lovely as it is, reminded of them, we get it. It's a standard thing that you did, because they also did this in the Crisis on Infinite Earth CW show, where they brought back like Burt Ward to be in one universe, and then they had the other actors from other Ashley Scott, who was hundreds.
Even Ezra appeared on the Flash series,
Yes. So that scene of Ezra meeting Grant Gustin, I wish we had a reprise of that.
Yeah, I really wish they actually gave a small little tribute to Grant Gustin.
And Grant Gustin has been doing like such hard work for all of this time, and has committed no crimes as far as we know. So, and I think the other thing that I really wanted
his crime is to be so cute. Too cute already.
Legal amounts of cute.
Yeah.
So the other thing that frustrated me, the spoiler kind of like, I wish it did that and they didn't do that, was Affleck meeting Keaton. That I was very sure would happen at some point. Batman comparing looks at the other Batman, and they didn't do that. They never filmed anything together. And
John, do you notice any other interesting cameos?
Not so much cameos, but I would say more of the point that Jedd mentioned. So in Flashpoint, the comic, most of the comic is narrated, and at first you do not know who the narrator is. And then you find out at the end that the narrator, I mean, you do find out that it's Batman, but you're not sure what he's narrating. But you find out at the end that it is Thomas Wayne, his letter to Bruce Wayne, because he passed a letter to Flash to pass to Bruce Wayne from him, and it's him narrating the story, and you find out that you're reading the letter like you're experiencing Flashpoint through Bruce's eyes.
And he would never get to see his son again, but he knows his son is out there.
Yes, and he's happy that his son is alive, and he's basically just telling the son like, keep being a hero. Do not let the darkness continue to him and the mom, where the mom became the Joker, and he is a very dark version of Batman. He
alcoholic and uses guns.
Yeah. So I wanted something similar like that in the movie.
So so was the ending, like the resolution, satisfying for you in terms of the adaptation?
The George Clooney Batman is a fascinating choice.
So we had heard, all right, like going into this, we had heard that the fan screenings for weeks were unfinished.
Yes,
cut out the secret ending. there's a secret ending and there's a post-credit scene that the fans are not actually seeing in that
Yeah.
cut. And so the version that Tina and I saw was the first time they were showing the finished
A
cut
full
to
version, yeah.
a full audience, because I didn't know. Before I went in, I thought we wouldn't have the secret ending. And the secret ending is, Barry goes into a universe and he's talking on the phone to Bruce Wayne, the Batman, and like the voice sounds a bit different on the phone, and then the guy gets out of the car and it's George Clooney. So this is the whole thing, right? The whole thing is, for me, I have a lot of feelings about this, because on one hand, it's a pretty good joke, right? It's a pretty good kind of throwaway acknowledgement joke. And George Clooney has for years tried to distance himself from Batman Robin. He says that he regrets doing Batman Robin. He has this thing where he says he would pay people back money on the street if he saw them and they told him that they bought a ticket for Batman Robin. So the idea is that he would never want to be associated with it again. But it's also like, it's been long enough, and like the perception of Batman and Robin has sort of like solidified into this kind of beloved camp classic, that he can touch it again without it damaging his reputation as an actor and as a filmmaker. Now it's just like a fun thing for him to do. But the other thing to me is like, it promises a world where George Clooney is Batman now, that I want to see. I want to see George Clooney, present day George Clooney, as Batman, because I think he would be fantastic. I think that sort of like a Syriana mode, haunted, tortured George Clooney would be great, and that is never going to happen. So it is a bit of a tease, to say that we got George Clooney back for one day, we got him back for 15 minutes on the set, but he's never actually going to come back and really be Batman. He's not. So the question is that there's this movie reboot into the James Gunn DCU, and it's like, not really, because the original intention was that the ending of this movie was going to lead into Batgirl, because in Batgirl the main Batman is Michael Keaton, but Commissioner Gordon, Batgirl's father, is J.K. Simmons. So the idea is that Batgirl, which we never are going to see, was this universe of taking bits and pieces of the other universes and recombining it into a new Prime universe.
Yeah,
So
I suppose
the
probably
original intention was Flash would
one
do
of
that.
those rewrites after they decided what to do with Batgirl as well. The write-off of Batgirl, which is very sad. A lot of people have been looking forward to seeing that, and we'll probably never see it ever again.
And like, even if you don't care about Batgirl, Brendan Fraser is Firefly in it. Michael Keaton is Batman, and I think Leslie Grace would have been a very good Batgirl. I was excited for that movie, and it is from the directors who did Bad Boys for Life and Captain Marvel. So it's
I
kind
think
of
this is a good point to move on to what we think might happen in the future for DC in movies and TV shows. John, do you have any opinion on that?
I mean, talking about Thomas Wayne, right? Perhaps we will see a adaptation of DC White Knight soon, because after Flashpoint, there was interest in this Thomas Wayne timeline, and then they had that with DC White Knight. And I am interested to see what James Gunn does. I know he's been reading a lot of Grant Morrison, which is one of my favorite comic writers. I would like to see.
This movie feels very Grant Morrison-y.
Yes.
It feels very Jeff Johns-y. Yeah.
He's starting out with Superman Legacy in 2025, I think, where it's targeted to be released. I mean, but for the near future, though, we have a few coming up.
And anytime you're explaining this, you have to like pull down a chalkboard and kind of do slides. So
I think it's sad that they have changed so many owners, like by buying over WB in the last few years. There's AT&T, and then now the Discovery, and therefore the IP of DC has been changing hands a few times.
It is very frustrating because you're looking at the ownership of a studio that it feels like they don't know what they have. They don't know the classics of Warner Brothers of cinema that Warner Brothers has made over 100 years. They don't know the potential of the DC characters and how much you can harness them. So it's very frustrating as fans to kind of look at corporate doing that. Look at like David Zaslav every decision is a bad decision. So I think the thing I'm worried about is James Gunn has to report to David Zaslav. So
Yes.
whatever James Gunn can or cannot do is decided by
It's
David
still
Zaslav.
under David Zaslav's decision. And the thing also about the fans, kind of like sabotaging themselves between the Snyder bros and the rest who are less obsessive about Snyderverse. I mean, I have to say I do like Zack Snyder stuff, but this group of fans tend to be can be very toxic as well. So that causes a lot of bad vibes. And they are not like favorable at all with what James Gunn will be doing, but I'm for the look and see. I mean, James Gunn is not the worst. He's actually a very good director and storyteller in his own way. But looking forward, right now we have Blue Beetle, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and Joker 2, right? That's coming up. And then after that, there's another one which is the Batman 2 as well.
Batman 2,
that's still confirmed. So then we have the reboot or refresh with the Gunniverse, which will then be his Superman: The Legacy. And I'm just curious to see what else besides the Superman: The Legacy that they will be willing to announce, in the next year or so.
They're doing Batman Brave and the Bold, which Andy Muschietti has actually signed on to do. So they're retaining Andy Muschietti for the new universe.
Yeah. What I'm sad though is the death of anything on TV. The Arrowverse has ended, and then with the last few episodes of 9 seasons, after the 9 seasons of The Flash, it's so ironic that The Flash in the Arrowverse TV series is the last one to end, and then here comes the Flash movie, So, and also the HBO ones, which is like Titans and Doom Patrol, is also not renewed. Titans even ended, and then Superman and Lois.
I guess because, season,
because they are ending with a cliffhanger, and with Lex Luthor just coming in the last 2 episodes, probably they have managed to fight for a new season. But it's so sad to see that it's a short one with only 10 episodes, and not only that, like 7 of the cast are not returning, and some of them have been there since the beginning. So a few of us is like, so what's happening? Are they still in Smallville? Because these people do live in Smallville. They can't just disappear, right? And then, or is it going to be held in Metropolis, maybe, or in another universe? We have no idea.
Everyone stands behind a shower.
It's so weird. You can see things happening in the movieverse, right, of DC stuff, but in the TV, there's this big question mark. Even the Penguin spin-off from the Batman is put on hold because of the writer's strike. But actually, that one was what I was looking forward to, because like Colin as the Penguin. So what I see from what's left right now of DC shows in TV, other than cartoons that I'm not that familiar with, is Peacemaker and season 2. And I'm not even sure whether Harley Quinn will continue the animated series.
So what I can tell you, Tina, is that James Gunn's announcement that he made earlier this year, the idea of it was that there would be an ecosystem that the movies and the TV shows share, which is, I guess, they're trying to aim for what the MCU has, when now all the MCU movies and the Disney Plus TV shows are in dialogue. So the shows that were announced, and it may happen, may not happen, but he announced Waller. He announced on the Amanda Waller show that Viola Davis is going to lead.
I remember about that.
And then he announced a Wonder Woman origin TV series, and there's also going to be what was it? There's Creature Commandos is an animated series, and then animated movie, if I'm not wrong. And the idea is that the actors who are cast in the animated version will go on to also play the live action versions when they adapt it. So there is stuff that is going to happen on TV that is talking to the movies, that is kind of in dialogue with the movies. So there's a bunch of stuff like that that's going to happen. So we'll see. I mean, the thing is and then the Batman, Joker, those are sitting outside. Those are Elseworlds. So those don't touch the main continuity. But honestly, I think anytime you try and tie yourself into too much of a connected universe, you kind of create a trap for yourself, which is what happened. That's what happening with the MCU now.
I'm not sure whether what John thinks, because he doesn't really watch the TV stuff. But for me, I have always been the one that didn't mind the kind of semi-messiness of DC stuff, like being separate, from
Right,
one
because like
to the other.
Supergirl is not actually in the
Yeah,
same world as Flash. Like they had
correct.
to meet in the
I didn't
crossover.
really care because it was more of the
that's fun.
enjoyment of the storytelling and the characters involved. If they bring them over for crossovers, fine, and so be it, and we'll have fun with it, because once you start with a very, very tight, united kind of storytelling that Marvel and Disney has decided to do with the Marvel characters, then for somebody to come in again, right, in the middle, right, you need to remember what happened from Iron Man.
Yeah, it gets very
Follow
unwieldy.
through.
Like
Yeah.
even in comics where the world exists with Avengers and X-Men, and if you stop to think about it, you're just like, how do these two team exist in the same universe? X-Men is constantly having their own world ending shenanigans, whereas
Yeah.
Avengers is also having their own world ending shenanigans. It's just like the constant stress normal people must be going through. Like on a day-to-day, that must be unbearable.
So and I think okay, so I have the list here for TV. There's Creature
Okay.
Commandos, there's Waller, Booster Gold. So they're gonna do a Booster Gold show.
Oh yes, Booster
Yeah,
Gold.
and then Lanterns. They're finally doing the Green Lanterns TV show that HBO was talking about for a very long time. That is going to be like Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart's teaming up. It's a buddy show, and then Paradise Lost is the Wonder Woman
Wonder Woman.
origin. Yeah, so those are the TV shows, and then the movies. The list of the movies are Superman Legacy, The Authority, The Brave and the Bold, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and Swamp Thing. So the question is whether or not Sasha Calle is staying on for Supergirl. Whether that is because she herself doesn't know. They haven't told her if she is James Gunn's Supergirl.
I forgot to
So
mention.
these are all the things that are up in the air. Sorry.
I forgot to mention she looks really good in the show.
And she looks like she could be related to Henry Cavill. From angles they look like. Yeah, because that is the thing. The thing is that traditionally Supergirl's always been blonde, right? And Superman has a dark hair. But if they both have dark hair, then they both look more like cousins, I guess.
I like that she was really, really angry.
Yes.
It's not. I mean, for a long while, right? When people show women being angry, it's like we are crazy or something wrong with us, But she's like,
hysteria,
angry. I think it's good just to show that women are just not one-sided and nice and smiling all the time.
And a lot of people forget that she is stronger than Superman.
Yeah.
Canonically, yeah.
And the
I
anger is very real.
Yeah,
I just like them in the scene where they go to Siberia to free her. There's a moment which I think is my favorite Michael Keaton moment, and it is the bat measuring tape.
Oh yes.
So, the bat measuring tape and how much do you weigh? So how much do you weigh is a reference to he says that to Kim Basinger in the first one, right? So that is I think like a nice reference where you need to do a bit of work. Because Let's Get Nuts is a reference where you don't need to do the work. I didn't like them doing Let's Get Nuts, That's too much.
I think it was a bit out of context also.
Yeah, let's Get Nuts. Like it's just like that meme in Simpsons where everyone is turning around and like say it, say the thing. So there are moments when Michael Keaton is kind of like he is a bit like okay, give me the money. But then there are other moments when he's really good. The moments when he's really bringing that sort of.
Also, we don't know what happened in the cutting floor, after the edit.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, Sasha Calle has said that there is a version of this that is a lot more violent, where there's a lot more kind of like bloody carnage that Supergirl is where she like cuts people in half with her laser, her heat vision and things like that.
They don't want all the primary school girls to go rage out.
My one complaint about the suit is that they are doing, the bodysuit, which is most versions of Supergirl there is the skirt, right? But then this one is the bodysuit. Yeah. So I wanted red boots. Her bodysuit is completely blue. There is no kind of delineation for boots. So I always feel like Superman or Supergirl, like they need to have the red boots or the red shoes. So when it goes, straight blue, then it feels like there isn't that kind of like it isn't complete. It's a good suit.
That's very much the entire show. It's not complete.
It's like you're just missing a little bit. You're missing a little bit of red on the boots.
It just
all
miss
you need. Yeah,
the kind of vibrant
nagging at
color.
you.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of color that you are used to when you're actually reading or even watching on TV. I think
And
that was what missed out.
because like whenever it's CGI, it feels like muddy, and that is the thing. It's
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like
yeah. That's the
vibrance.
thing.
Vibrance is the
The whole
opposite of
colors
muddy.
palette,
Yeah,
just becomes like this orangey, gray,
sludge. Yeah.
sludgy thing.
So that's kind of the thing that's frustrating. But I feel like honestly, if all of the circumstances that they had to deal with, and this is the thing that they delivered, it's really impressive. Which I mean, to me, I feel like it's a very different kind of context. But Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is also like your star died, after you
Mm,
wrote the script, and while you were in pre-production, your star died, and you rewrote the entire script to be about the death of the character. That to
yeah,
me was also like very impressive, and it's like the stuff that they had to deal with that was sort of thrown at them that is beyond the usual kind of logistic complications or things shuffling around that happens
yeah,
when you're making movies of this scale. So
yeah,
I do give them the credit for that, but it's
yeah,
also like I also think like at the end of the day, like it pains me to say it, but it's also like this is more trouble than it's worth. You know,
yeah. But
like when you come out and you after you watch it, you're like it's good, but it's not like the
yeah,
people
same.
saying it's the greatest
Yeah.
thing since the Dark Knight, and so therefore
Yeah.
it's worth all of the
I
trouble.
think
Yeah,
to kind of like going down into a wrap up of this live stream, I do agree. It's not, as I said, not life changing. It wasn't that electrifying enough for me, although I enjoyed my time in the theater. And
yeah.
I
I
don't
like
feel
seeing
that
a giant spider fight Nicolas Cage.
I don't feel like it's a waste of your movie ticket for any superhero fan who likes watching, movies like this. And like the
No,
first time
yeah,
you're seeing the Flash on a big screen in his own movie, not just as like one of the uh, parts in Justice League or something like this. Yeah, it's still worth your time. Uh, Despite of all the issues that we have discussed concerning the main star as well as WB's treatment and PR. Uh, what about you, John? What did you think about it as we go into a wrap up?
Yeah, I think the show was as competent as it could have been, and uh, it, it served its purpose in doing what it intended to do. But I wouldn't. I agree with you. It's not the best film I've ever seen. It's not the
Yeah,
best
it's not the
superhero
best.
film
Mm.
I've ever seen. It's
look
not.
look at the costume. I'm sorry, but look at the
Oh,
Supergirl
you want me to
costume.
flash
If you
that
could bring
again?
it back, yeah.
Yeah,
So you see the red on the arms and the cape, like it
yeah,
just is yelling for red on the legs,
Uh,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's just yelling for red on the boots.
yeah. But the cape
I
looks fantastic, though.
like the cape attachment. I
Yeah,
like the
the
idea of
cape
the
looks
cape
good.
blending
Yeah,
into the over the
she really
shoulder and
looks
the
good
accent down the
in
arm. Yeah,
flight.
it's a good kind of like lateral of the Henry Cavill suit. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about that Henry Cavill suit when I saw her put that thing on in the trailers. It's like very similar uh, to what Henry Cavill was wearing. Anyway, I think we shouldn't keep this for too long. Some people might get bored of us geeking out over superhero stuff. But if you have held on and watched this later on as well, thank you for joining us. I know our like friend Marcus Go has posed some of the questions. I haven't flashed your questions on screen because I was afraid that it will take up a lot of the screen space while we are doing the live stream. But I think we have answered a lot of your questions, so I hope that you'll be able to get some of the answers that you asked when you watch this live stream later on. And hold on, John and Jedd, while I say goodbye and tell the people what to expect in future months. Um, I I know I've said that I invited a guest or so for the next live stream, and it's still being in discussion because of the time constraints that she has. She's doing a project right now, so I haven't announced for my guest for the next live stream or when it will be held. But do look out on my social media as to when that will be and who my guest will be. I'm still looking out for interesting creatives who are based in Southeast Asia who would like to appear on my live stream. If you know of an artist or a writer, even a cosplayer or someone who does crafts, a content creator, somebody who does anything creative and has something to share, I would like to have you on my live stream as well. And I I would like to do more of these movie reviews from time to time, and we might, depending on John and Jedd's time, we might get into other non-superhero movies as well if we all three of us watch it. If you do like this kind of movie reviews, please maybe give us a comment or a few more likes, and then we'll kind of plan on that for future. Meanwhile, I'll get them all back on screen again, and we'll just say goodbye for now. You can actually ask more questions if you want on Facebook and YouTube. I think we can get some of the questions from there and answer you accordingly. For Jedd, do you want to let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah.
Social
So
media.
most of my writing is at jeddjong.net. Yong is spelled with a J, and then most places I am Jedd the Jedi, JEDDTHEJEDI, and then I'm also Jedi the movie guy for sort of movie specific stuff. That's me on Instagram, Jedi the movie guy. So yeah, follow me on my personal Instagram, which is Jedd the Jedi, for a lot of toy photos, occasional kind of toy photos, and then for Jedi the movie guy, it's my movie reviews. And
And
yeah, I
John?
write for Chris World, so if you happen to be on Singapore Airlines, then you can access the PDF.
Yes.
You can actually
It's
also read it without getting
available online, right? Right now, even.
just for free. Yeah, Chris World.
Okay, John, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me at Toddlers at everywhere. It's the same username everywhere, but I'm mostly. You can reach out to me mostly on Instagram, Twitter. Sometimes I might not respond because that platform's a bit of a mess these days.
Yeah.
But if you have any comic questions, you can shoot it my way. Any recommendations that you might want to get, or if you want to get started in DC, Marvel, or anything else, you could send me a question. I might be able to provide you a starting point.
Okay. Thanks, you guys, for being on this show. And thank you for the
Keaton
audience
says
as well.
bye. Kenny Keaton says bye.
We'll see you on another live stream in the future. Look out for the announcements. You can follow me on my Red Dot Diva Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, where I post a lot of fun pictures. And see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye,
Tina.
everyone.
Thank you, John. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.